We have some breaking news. And by the way, I work with Marty Carpenter, and we start the day with breaking news from Congress that they're going to talk about the Senate's going to vote on the opening the government again. I'm the tongue-tied here. Right. Yep. Then we have breaking news from Grand Blanc, Michigan, that they have some news about the shooting. Now we have breaking news from Heather Peterson at KSL NewsRadio that the governor.
It's an easy money day. I think I've only
I
done
know.
like 2 seconds.
What's up with that? What's going on, Heather?
Yeah,
Sorry.
so as Adam just told us a couple minutes ago, Governor Spencer Cox has officially called a special session for Monday that's going to start at 9 a.m. And we did already kind of know this was coming. The legislature has been talking about having a special session on October 6th, but the governor's proclamation today makes it official. And they're going to be talking about the redistricting effort, and this is going to be the day where they are deciding on congressional maps that they're going to be presenting to the judge. But the governor's proclamation did also include a number of other issues that they're going to talk about as well.
Is it in the proclamation?
Yeah, it's a very long proclamation, though.
Sorry.
So
13 points to
yeah,
it. So.
Election
but you've
record.
memorized that by now, Heather,
Oh,
so why don't you just recite them to us?
No, just a preliminary glance right now. It talks about election record amendments, county governance amendments, vehicle assessments. So a lot of smaller issues. I know the redistricting one is the big one on the docket, though.
That's the big one. And no surprise, right?
No, they've had this on the legislature's schedule and timeline for the redistricting effort for the last couple of weeks. So this comes as no surprise, but now the governor's made it official.
And we broke it here on KSL News Radio. Thanks, Heather. So, Marty, no surprise?
No surprise that they're going to do it. I mean, it's sort of been the timeline that they've been working on. Nice to see that there are two ways the legislature can come into a special session. They can be called there by the governor, or in certain circumstances, they can call themselves. This just means that so far everybody's working together to get this done. So the governor's called it, and I was like it better when the governor calls them myself.
Yeah, it almost had to have been predetermined because we're in the public comment period on the redistricting. The 10-day period, then the legislature has to meet, and there's no way they meet without calling a special session, I guess. I mean, that's what essentially happens.
In order to actually make any kind of changes, yeah, they have to do that.
Okay. Did it surprise you that, as Heather just indicated, that there are a number of other items on the agenda?
No.
I mean, and by the way, does the governor announce that you're calling a special session to address A, B, C, D, and E?
Yeah, it's outlined very specifically what you're allowed to. They don't just open the doors and say, "Hey, you're back in session. Do whatever you need." We're here to consider these specific points, and even when the legislature calls itself into session, they have to outline specifically what they're there to consider, what they're meeting to consider. So, not a surprise that they're doing that. I think it's actually probably a matter of there's a number of things that have been discussed at interim that need to get cleaned up, and while we're here, let's, the cost comes with bringing everybody together. So while we've spent some taxpayer money, let's go ahead and take care of some business that needs to get done. We can do that now. Secondly, and again, I'm always looking at things from like a public messaging perspective here. Even though there is one thing that the media is going to cover and what people are mostly interested in and what's going to happen during the special session, never bad to sort of have other things surround that. Otherwise, they could essentially come in. They're going to have the votes for whichever one they want by the time they show up. So they're going to show up, have some element of debate, quote unquote debate over it, and then vote. And once it's voted on, then they're done. So to some respect, I would think from the optics perspective, you do not want to have this special session over in 30 minutes. Not that it would be quite that quick, but you'd like to say, okay, there are a number of things that we're going to go enact here and give us something else that can at least be part of the news.
And in that respect, would you expect that, let's say, and I don't recall let's say one of them is election law review reform or something like that. I don't recall how Heather articulated it. Would you expect that they're not just going to be thrown some legislation that, like the redistricting, the legislature has a heads up. They know what's going to be. Yeah, they know what's proposed.
Right. It's not a surprise to anybody when they get there. They everyone knows what's on the agenda. They know what they've discussed. Each of the parties will have most likely had caucus meetings on this, so they understand where they are as a body. They have nose counts on all of the votes. It's to a certain extent like it's just needs to happen. It's not a surprise that most people up there who are members of the House or members of the Senate already know how they're going to vote on most of these things. And they go and you go through the process of hearing, some speeches and some input from your colleagues on the floor so that you can then, ultimately vote. But pretty much everyone knows how it's going to vote. There are certainly people up there who know not only how this is going to go, but probably really close to what the final vote count.
How it's going to go. Are special sessions the rule anymore, or the exception? It seems like we do have them quite a bit.
We have them with some frequency. I mean, the design here in our state, obviously, is we have a 45-day legislative session each year from the day following Martin Luther King Day until whenever that 45 calendar days runs out, usually the first week of March now. It didn't used to be that way. 10 years ago or so, it was the Tuesday, or we started the Monday after Martin Luther King Day.
Right.
And so we went till about March 14th, mid-March is when it used to happen. You know, we have special sessions with some frequency. We don't have them every month. Some years we've had 2 or 3, and some years you don't have any. But I'd say more frequently now you probably have a couple in each year, generally to say this is something that can't wait until late January or into February for us to fix it during the session, and it's something that we need to do right away.
And Representative Doug Owens, who joined us earlier, talked about the fact that there's a group, the small group, the subgroup that held the public hearings, maybe meeting before the special session. I don't recall what he was talking about.
Well, like in any situation, you don't have what we'll have on Monday is when the entire House gets together and the entire Senate gets together and they vote on it.
Okay.
And like as the legislative process generally, not everyone has time and bandwidth to dig into every single issue. So you form committees. Committees go and explore things and make recommendations to the full body, and then the full body can get more information, and then the full body can vote, and that's when the law is enacted.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I wish you. Are you coming back next week?
I'm back here a week from today.
Good. We need to break down what happened here. We need to have a full show together. We had 3 interruptions today, and hopefully we don't have another one. But yesterday on this show, and I'm joined this morning by Marty Carpenter. Yesterday, Marty, on the show, we talked with Utah Republican Chair Rob Axson, who said in no uncertain terms what he thinks about the court's mapping decision.
First and foremost, I disagree with the decision of the judge here. I do not think that moving to the courts making decisions on this or even the independent commission makes sense. Our Constitution here in the state is pretty clear that the role and authority of redistricting is that of the legislatures.
So the Republicans did submit 5 proposed maps. The Democrats, I think, submitted 1. Democratic Party Chair Brian King was upset at the fact that the Utah Republican Party was encouraging public comment with respect to one of their particular maps. It was Map C. Axson spoke about King's disapproval on that issue as well.
The idea that the Utah Republican Party, or that any Utahn, or any group for that matter, whether they agree with me or not, has to be silent or quiet is one that I just absolutely reject.
So we do have Utah Representative Doug Owens with us. Doug, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Greg. Nice to be here with you. Hi, Marty.
And my co-host, Marty Carpenter, has a question about, since you're a lawyer, I think he wants to ask you about the legalities of this a little bit.
So I know just enough about this to be dangerous, and I was mostly asking our legal expert here, Greg, in the break,
I'm going to hand off to Owens here.
Help me understand this. So, all right, there's essentially a challenge made to Utah's maps. It works its way up to a district court. A district court judge says, I agree, they weren't done appropriately. For whatever reason, they're thrown out. That forces then the legislature to go redraw boundaries. What I don't understand is to what extent does the judge still play a role in this? Like, does she just throw out the maps and then that's the end of that process? We go create new maps, and if you want to challenge those, you start that process over? That would seem to be the case to me, and I think would make sense to a lot of people. What is the role that the judge plays in this at this point? Because if the judge then becomes sort of the arbiter of whether or not the new maps are good, I think that would feel like to a lot of people that's beyond what the situation should merit, that she gets to rule on the old maps, but now the new maps get to be created by the body that does create them, which is the legislature. Can you just help me understand what I don't understand?
Well, Marty, the way I see it is the judge is trying to fashion an equitable remedy, because the Supreme Court said the legislature could not have ignored Prop 4 like they did, okay? And so the district court is trying to make an equitable remedy that can happen before next year's election and not delay it and have a bad map stay in place. And so she has said, Judge Gibson, that the legislature can draw a map and use its the best criteria that it thinks apply, and she'll consider that. If she considers that to be compliant with Prop 4, I think she's going to do it. She'll say that's the map that should be in place for next year's election. If she thinks that the legislature has not complied with Prop 4 properly, then she will go to the plaintiff's map. So that's the legal construct, trying to enforce the Supreme Court decision that says the legislature was not entitled to ignore Prop 4 and enact, and when the people say they want to restructure the way they do their government, the legislature is not allowed to just willy-nilly ignore that.
So let's talk about the logistics, Doug, of how we get there. Right now, we're in a 10-day public comment period, which I think ends on Sunday. It ends on the 5th, I think. The legislature is meeting in some level of special session, or is it just the group that was the group of 10 that had the public hearings? Who's meeting on Monday?
So there'll be a committee meeting early in the morning to probably presumably recommend one map. I mean, and then there's a special session right after that to enact the map.
And that's Monday?
That is Monday. That's all going to happen on Monday, and they'll probably take action. It's not definitive at this point, but they'll probably take action on this statutory change, which I think is a big mistake, to change Prop 4. The court said, go follow Prop 4, and right out of the chute, there's a proposition, again, a bill that's in play now offered by a Republican senator, Brammer, to change Prop 4 and specify some of the tests that are to be done. And I think that's a big mistake. I think we should just be following honestly Prop 4, do an honest effort at complying with the criteria stated in Prop 4. That's the only thing that's going to get the legislature's map to pass muster with the judge. And I think it's not a good idea to play games. And I think about complying with Prop 4, and I think there are some deficiencies in how the map that's I think going to get enacted. The map C clearly seems to be where people are headed in the majority party to enact map C, which I think is a very defective map. It splits Democrats out, and so they cannot have a competitive seat. When if you look at randomly drawn maps, the overwhelming majority of randomly drawn maps produce a map where Democrats are competitive.
So
in one district.
Right. With respect to map C, Doug, it is, I mean, the current map has Salt Lake County divided 4 ways. That's probably untenable. But Salt Lake County has to be divided some way because it is too large to fit in one of the parameters of Prop 4, which is that you have to have 4 districts that are roughly the same size, which is about 900,000 people. So in some respects, Salt Lake has to be divided, and all 5 of the Republican maps divide Salt Lake, I think, twice, Salt Lake County. So what additional problem do you have with the map as it relates to Salt Lake?
Yeah. So let's look at Prop 4, okay? Yeah, you're right, Greg. Salt Lake County does have to be divided. The question is how you do that. So what Prop 4 says is you're supposed to ignore party when you are drawing your map. You're supposed to look at, are you splitting cities, counties? Are you keeping communities of interest together? Are you matching up boundaries with other kinds of districts? There's 7 criteria listed, and it says you do them in this priority, okay? And you're not allowed to look at party when you do that. Then, after you draw the map, you must look at party and ask the question. This is in Prop 4. It says you must consider, are you damaging one party unduly? Are you favoring or damaging one party? And that analysis is the critical one, because if you can program a computer to draw maps with those 7 criteria that ignore party, and you can, with a keystroke, you can draw thousands of maps, okay? And if you look at those maps, the average ones, they always show at least one district where a Democrat is competitive. And what has emerged from the process that the Republicans have done in the legislature is a process where all 5 of the proposed maps do not have a competitive Democratic district. So there's something going on that suggests strongly to me that the these are not being fairly drawn. And C especially has the least, the most division of Democrats. And that's the problem with the map that was enacted, right, that split Democrats almost evenly to the 4 districts. And that's classic gerrymandering known as cracking, a cracking technique. And so what we'd like to see is a fair process. And we think that the expert that was hired by the majority party, a guy named Sean Trendy, applied some tests to say that these districts were fair, and we don't think those are good tests. And in fact, his test said that the enacted map that split up the Democrats perfectly, almost perfectly, among the 4 districts, he said that was fine from his test perspective. And we don't think that was, the old map was fine, and we think that these maps A, B, C, and D, and E, we think those maps, he says, are not punitive to one party. We think they are punitive to one party. And so that's our heartburn.
All right, that was Doug Owens joining us, Utah Democratic representative. We'll learn a lot more about this next week.